Imagine the room is quiet, almost unnaturally quiet, and you feel it before you even see it. A shift, a sudden tension in the air, like the universe just paused to let something important happen. You notice the way their eyes linger, not out of attraction alone, but out of recognition, the kind of recognition that hits hard because it's both unexpected and undeniable. In that split second, they realize something about you that shakes their usual rhythm, something they can't ignore. You are not like anyone else they've known. They are used to bending people to the tides of their own fears, used to pushing away anyone who threatens to get too close. But in you, they encounter resistance that is not rude, not defensive, but calm, unwavering, entirely unshakable. That is the spark, the flicker of awareness that slowly grows into something that frightens and fascinates them at the same time. You are strong, not in the loud, brash way the world often celebrates, but in the quiet, deep way that makes others realize the weight of their own insecurities. And in that realization, there's a pause, a hesitation, a moment where they silently ask themselves if they've underestimated what it means to face someone who is too solid to be shaken by their usual patterns. This is the essence of the avoidant mind, a place where fear and fascination constantly battle for control. They live in a world of walls, constructed brick by brick, to protect themselves from the vulnerability they fear most. Intimacy feels dangerous because it demands exposure, and exposure threatens the fragile balance they've built over years. They are experts at distancing themselves emotionally, at disengaging before anyone can see the cracks they desperately try to hide. Yet, when someone enters their life with a quiet strength, with self-possession and clarity, those walls begin to tremble, not because they are weak, but because strength challenges them in a way they cannot rationalize. Your confidence does not provoke anger or resentment. It provokes reflection, something they rarely allow themselves. The patterns they have mastered, the subtle push and pull tactics, the emotional games, all of these suddenly feel inadequate against the presence of someone who will not bend or break under the usual currents. They begin to sense a new possibility, one that is exhilarating yet terrifying, the awareness that maybe, just maybe, they are facing a force they cannot contain. What is it about your strength that is so magnetic, so disarming, yet simultaneously intimidating? It is not just the way you hold yourself in a room or the ease with which you navigate life's storms. It is the consistency, the unshakable foundation that allows you to remain composed when they test boundaries or retreat into their habitual silence. You do not chase, you do not plead, you do not try to explain yourself endlessly. You simply are, and in your being, you radiate a sense of security and self-respect that quietly exposes their own fears. There is no judgment in your presence, no accusation, only an unwavering truth. You know your worth, you understand your limits, and you refuse to compromise the integrity of your own emotions. That clarity, that refusal to be manipulated or drawn into emotional chaos, becomes a mirror they cannot look away from. Every instinct they've honed to maintain control starts to feel useless, and the panic beneath their composed exterior grows. The realization hits them slowly, almost cruelly. You are too strong for the patterns they've relied on for so long. The subtle shifts in behavior are where it becomes fascinating. At first it might seem like nothing, just small gestures, fleeting moments, but if you pay attention, they are telling. A lingering glance, a pause before replying, a slightly hesitant approach when they normally would have charged forward with distraction or detachment. Their mind races trying to decode what it is about you that creates this effect. They are used to seeing compliance, to seeing others adjust, to feeling in control. Yet, you remain consistent, calm, and unmovable. This unintentional defiance, this simple act of being fully yourself, is what disrupts the patterns they have relied upon for emotional safety. They are not used to someone who is both inviting and untouchable at the same time. Someone whose strength does not challenge them through aggression or drama, but through presence and self-possession. And in that space, a storm brews inside them, a mixture of awe, fear, curiosity, and the faintest glimmer of admiration that they dare not voice even to themselves. The internal conflict intensifies when they try to push against you, to test your limits, to see if they can still provoke a reaction, and nothing happens. No flinch, no retreat, no overreaction, just the calm persistence of someone who knows their own value and refuses to surrender it. That's when the realization crystallizes. This person cannot be manipulated, cannot be controlled, cannot be bent to the familiar dance of avoidance and pursuit. It is a jarring truth, one that leaves them off balance, forcing them to confront the discomfort they've long avoided. They begin to question the patterns they've always relied on, the walls they've so meticulously built, and the fears they've allowed to dictate their relationships. Your strength is not loud or aggressive, it is an anchor, and they are unmoored, suddenly aware that the old ways of maintaining distance will not work here. This moment, his realization, is subtle but seismic, a quiet turning point that shifts everything they thought they knew about connection and control. They might try to rationalize it, to convince themselves that it is not about your strength, but rather a temporary distraction, a coincidence, something that will fade if they ignore it long enough. But the truth is undeniable. Every interaction, every calm refusal to be shaken, every consistent demonstration of self-worth chips away at the armor they've relied on. They notice your patience, your unwavering composure, and your ability to navigate emotional turbulence without losing yourself. And in noticing, they are forced to reckon with a part of themselves they rarely confront, the part that fears being seen, that fears intimacy, that fears being rendered vulnerable to someone who will not yield. It is both terrifying and mesmerizing for them to encounter a presence that is simultaneously challenging and safe, someone whose strength is not a threat in the conventional sense, but a mirror that reflects their own limitations and insecurities. That reflection is almost unbearable, and yet it draws them in, creating an internal tension that is impossible to ignore. The way you handle yourself in moments of silence, in moments of disagreement, in moments when they expect to see fear or compromise, further solidifies their awareness. You do not flinch. You do not try to coax or manipulate. You simply exist with clarity and self-possession. Every instinct they have, honed over years to navigate relationships safely, begins to fail them in your presence. They feel a mix of admiration and anxiety, drawn to your confidence, while simultaneously terrified of what it reveals about their own vulnerabilities. Your strength exposes them not through confrontation or accusation, but through the quiet, unwavering assertion of your own boundaries and values. This realization is not immediate. It is cumulative, a slow burn that intensifies with every interaction, every calm refusal to be swayed, every demonstration of your self-reliance and emotional fortitude. And in that slow burn, they begin to recognize something profound. This is someone they cannot control, someone who challenges the patterns they've relied on, someone whose strength is both magnetic and frightening. By the time they consciously register it, the moment when thought catches up to feeling, they are acutely aware that they are facing someone beyond their usual reach. They notice the way you carry yourself, the subtle confidence in your decisions, the clarity with which you express your needs, and the unwavering way you protect your emotional space. Every aspect of your presence communicates a quiet power that they are unprepared for, a strength that is not aggressive or confrontational, but deeply rooted, unshakable, and authentic. It is in this recognition that the pivotal moment occurs. They realize they are dealing with someone too strong to manipulate, too self-assured to intimidate, too grounded to provoke. It is a revelation that challenges their habitual strategies and forces them to confront the very dynamics they have avoided for so long. In that moment, they feel both admiration and fear, a rare mixture that leaves them momentarily speechless, internally rattled, and profoundly aware of your influence. The tension doesn't just disappear once they realize your strength. It evolves, deepening into a quiet fascination that they can't quite name. Every interaction becomes a delicate dance where they are simultaneously intrigued and cautious, aware that the usual ways they've maneuvered people no longer apply. Their mind races with questions. How is it that someone can remain so composed when they provoke, when they push, when they eat into their familiar patterns? There is no outburst, no desperate plea, no emotional tug-of-war to be won or lost. There is only you, calm, steady, unyielding. And in that steadiness, they feel something strange, a mixture of awe, confusion, and an unsettling recognition that their old strategies are useless. The patterns that once brought them comfort now feel like chains they cannot escape from, and they are forced to confront a reality they've avoided for far too long. Someone else's strength can outshine their avoidance without trying. It is in this internal upheaval that they begin to test themselves, testing the limits of your strength without fully realizing it. They might push with subtle provocations, use silence as a tool, or withdraw entirely expecting you to falter, to overreact, to crumble under their familiar tactics. But you don't. You remain anchored, fully aware of your own boundaries, secure in your own worth, and steadfast in your emotional autonomy. Every failed attempt to disrupt your equilibrium is like a small earthquake in their psyche, shaking the foundation they've relied on for emotional control. They notice it, of course, even if they can't admit it out loud. Your strength is not confrontational, it's reflective, and it exposes them in ways that are both fascinating and frightening. Each moment of their failed test forces them to reckon with the truth. The rules they've played by for years do not apply here, and they are not prepared for someone who cannot be bent, broken, or intimidated. As their fascination grows, so does the fear of exposure, the deep-rooted fear that intimacy demands vulnerability. They feel pulled toward you, drawn in by your authenticity and composure, yet simultaneously terrified that giving in will require them to reveal parts of themselves they've kept hidden for decades. They are not accustomed to feeling lured by someone who is not chasing them, who is not dependent on their attention or validation. Your strength is magnetic because it is self-sufficient, not because it demands anything from them. And in this magnetic pull, there is a paradox. They want to close the distance, to connect, to experience closeness, but every fiber of their being resists, fearing the exposure that comes with vulnerability. The internal battle is intense. They admire you, they desire the connection, but they also fear the consequences of stepping into a space where their walls are useless. The admiration that grows within them is quiet, almost imperceptible, yet it is powerful. They begin to notice the smallest details about you, the way you handle stress without panic, the clarity with which you communicate your needs, the subtle confidence in how you navigate your own life. These observations are not loud proclamations, but small, almost imperceptible moments that build an internal acknowledgement. You are remarkable, and they have no control over your strength. They cannot manipulate it, bend it, or disrupt it. This quiet admiration often surprises them because it is unfamiliar. They are used to feeling like the one in control, the one who can shape the emotional landscape to their advantage. In recognizing your strength, they are confronted with a truth they rarely face, that their habitual defenses are powerless here, that they are dealing with someone whose self-possession cannot be diminished by avoidance or distance. But fascination alone does not make connection easy. The instinct to pull back emerges almost immediately, a reflex born of fear and conditioning. They sense that the closer they get, the more vulnerable they might become, and vulnerability is a territory they avoid at all costs. Even as they are drawn in by your strength, the fear of losing themselves in that pull tests a tension that is both electric and suffocating. They begin to distance themselves, retreating not out of disinterest, but out of a need to recalibrate, to process, to decide if engaging with someone as strong as you is worth the internal risk. And while this retreat may feel frustrating or confusing from your perspective, it is not rejection. It is a survival mechanism, an attempt to reconcile the attraction they feel with the fear that their own emotional armor might crumble in your presence. Every pause, every step back, every moment of hesitation is a silent acknowledgement of your power, a reflection of the unspoken truth. You are too strong for the avoidance games they have mastered, too grounded for the emotional manipulation they are accustomed to, and too authentic to be shaken by their habitual distancing. Amid this tension, the turning point in connection begins to emerge. Subtle, but undeniable. They start to reassess what they truly want, beyond the instinctual push-pull dynamics they have always relied upon. There is a flicker of recognition that connection with you is not about control or avoidance. It is about genuine engagement, emotional presence, and the mutual respect that comes from being with someone who cannot be shaken or bent. And while this realization is terrifying because it challenges the very patterns that have protected them for so long, it is also exhilarating, awakening a desire they rarely allow themselves to feel. They notice that your strength is not threatening in the conventional sense. It is inviting in the quietest way, offering a mirror of stability and self-respect that they cannot ignore. In these moments, the internal struggle intensifies, oscillating between fear, admiration, and curiosity as they silently confront the fact that they are facing someone whose emotional power eclipses their avoidance. Your calm power becomes the anchor in this storm. While they wrestle with conflicting impulses, you remain steady, unaffected by the games or tests they may deploy. There is no panic, no overreaction, no need to prove yourself. You simply exist in your strength, allowing them to see the contrast between their habitual avoidance and your unwavering self-possession. This quiet display of power does not humiliate or challenge them aggressively. It simply exposes the futility of their patterns and invites them to step into a more authentic engagement. Every attempt to provoke a reaction is met with composure. Every effort to retreat is met with equanimity, and in every interaction, they are forced to reckon with the reality that they are in the presence of someone who cannot be manipulated, intimidated, or shaken. The weight of this awareness is profound, leaving them both unsettled and captivated, caught in the magnetic pull of your presence, while simultaneously grappling with the discomfort of being confronted by their own avoidance tendencies. And so, they begin to notice authenticity in a way they rarely allow themselves to experience. Your words, your actions, your very being radiate a clarity that exposes pretense and games, and they find themselves silently compelled to acknowledge it. They notice the way you maintain integrity, the way you honor your own emotions without bending to fear, and the way you navigate relationships with honesty and grace. This authenticity is not aggressive. It is not meant to dominate or control. It is simply real, and the stark contrast to their avoidance-driven habits creates a quiet tension that is impossible to ignore. They start to see that connection with someone like you demands something they have long avoided: genuine vulnerability, emotional presence, and the courage to face parts of themselves that they have hidden behind walls for years. And as they confront this truth, the gravity of your strength becomes undeniable, leaving them both drawn in and wary, fascinated yet intimidated, deeply aware that they are facing someone they cannot diminish. Silent respect emerges as an unexpected consequence of this dynamic. Even without words, even without explicit acknowledgement, they begin to honor your presence, your composure, and your unwavering strength. It is a respect born of recognition, the understanding that you are not simply another person to navigate or manipulate, but someone whose authenticity and emotional stability demand acknowledgement. This respect does not come easily for them. It is not a conscious decision so much as a gradual internal recognition that grows with every interaction, every demonstration of self-possession, every calm refusal to be shaken by their avoidance tactics. And as this respect deepens, it transforms the internal landscape of their feelings, creating a tension between their habitual fear of intimacy and the undeniable pull towards someone who embodies strength, authenticity, and unwavering self-worth. Even the moments when they feel tempted to show vulnerability are fraught with internal struggle. They sense that opening up to you requires trust they have long denied themselves, and yet the magnetic pull of your strength makes the possibility of connection irresistible. They are caught between the instinct to retreat, to protect themselves from exposure, and the desire to engage, to experience the rare intimacy that comes from being with someone unshakably strong. In these moments, the internal conflict peaks, oscillating between fear and attraction, hesitation and curiosity, as they silently confront the paradox of wanting connection while fearing the vulnerability it demands. Your presence does not force them to choose. It simply exposes the tension, reflecting back the rants of themselves that they have hidden for too long, and inviting them quietly and compellingly to reconsider what connection and strength truly mean. Even as they begin to silently respect you, a strange and unsettling pull takes hold. They find themselves observing your actions with a heightened awareness, noticing the subtleties of your strength that they never anticipated. Every word you speak, every choice you make, every calm reaction to situations that might have rattled someone else becomes a point of fascination. They start to see how effortlessly you maintain your own boundaries without confrontation, how your emotional stability is a quiet force that commands attention without demanding it. And in that observation, there is a growing awareness that they are witnessing something they have rarely, if ever, experienced. Someone whose presence is so powerful, not because it intimidates, but because it inspires, because it mirrors the very authenticity they secretly crave, but have been too afraid to pursue. The awareness hits slowly, almost painfully, that they are drawn to something they cannot control, cannot predict, and cannot easily escape from. And this realization both terrifies and captivates them. Their instincts, honed over years of avoiding exposure, urge them to retreat, to reassert control by creating distance. Yet, the more they try to step back, the more they feel pulled toward you, unable to resist the quiet magnetism of your strength. It is a paradox that confounds them. Every instinct they have built to preserve themselves fails when confronted with someone who does not react in the ways they expect. They begin to notice how their usual tactics, subtle avoidance, emotional withdrawal, even the occasional coldness meant to test reactions, have no effect on you. You do not flinch, you do not bend, and you certainly do not beg for validation. Why? Our strength is a mirror that reflects their avoidance, exposing the limits of the protective behaviors they have relied on for so long. And in that exposure, they feel a mixture of awe, frustration, and an undeniable pull toward the authenticity and stability they are only beginning to understand. They start to reflect internally on their own patterns, almost unconsciously, comparing the ease with which you exist in your power to the constant internal struggle they've endured for years. Every moment with you becomes a mirror for their own unresolved fears, insecurities, and habitual defenses. They see that the emotional walls they have built, the defenses they have perfected, cannot contain the reality of someone who is fundamentally strong and self-sufficient. This reflection is uncomfortable, even painful, but it is also enlightening, offering a rare glimpse into the possibility of connection without manipulation, fear, or retreat. They notice that your calm power is not about winning or dominating. It is about presence, authenticity, and unwavering self-respect, qualities they have rarely encountered and never fully understood until now. As they grapple with these realizations, the temptation to be vulnerable begins to emerge, though it is a slow, halting process. They feel the pull of connection, the desire to step closer, to share parts of themselves that they have long hidden behind walls. Yet, every step toward openness is accompanied by fear, a fear that vulnerability will lead to loss of control, exposure of weaknesses, or emotional pain. They are torn between the instinct to retreat and the growing curiosity about what it would feel like to engage with someone who cannot be shaken or manipulated. This internal struggle is intense, a silent battlefield of desire, fear, admiration, and insecurity, where each thought and feeling is amplified by the awareness of your strength. The tension is palpable, almost electric, as they navigate this unfamiliar territory, realizing that connection with you demands more courage than they have ever summoned before. It is in this space that the mirror effect begins to take hold. Without even realizing it, they start reflecting aspects of your behavior, mimicking your patience, your composure, your clarity in ways that surprise them. They notice themselves pausing before reacting, choosing words more carefully, and observing situations with the calm insight that you model effortlessly. This reflection is not conscious. It is an unconscious alignment with someone whose strength cannot be ignored, someone whose presence forces them to confront the parts of themselves they have long avoided. They find themselves both inspired and unsettled, captivated by your authenticity while struggling with the unfamiliarity of their own responses. In these moments, they begin to sense the profound influence of your strength, the quiet yet undeniable power that reshapes not only how they see you, but how they see themselves and their own emotional capabilities. The internal conflict peaks as they wrestle with the duality of fear and attraction. Every instinct to retreat is met with the magnetic pull of your presence. Every impulse to remain detached is challenged by the recognition that connection with you is something they have never fully experienced. They are caught in a storm of admiration, curiosity, and anxiety, aware that they are confronting a force they cannot control, cannot bend, and cannot diminish. And in this storm, the awareness grows that they are facing someone whose strength is not an obstacle to connection, but a doorway to understanding, authenticity, and emotional presence. This realization is both thrilling and terrifying, leaving them in a state of heightened awareness, silently grappling with the depth of your influence, and beginning to understand the undeniable truth that they are encountering someone too strong to be ignored, too grounded to be unsettled, and too authentic to be manipulated. By the time they arrive at the epiphany, the awareness has crystallized. They are no longer merely observing your strength. They are confronted with it in a way that changes everything. They recognize that your presence is not simply a challenge to their patterns. It is a revelation, a force that exposes the inadequacy of their avoidance, the futility of their games, and the necessity of confronting their own vulnerabilities. This realization is profound, striking at the core of their habitual behaviors and forcing them to acknowledge the reality of your unwavering strength. It is in this epiphany that the tension reaches its apex, as they silently confront the truth that they are facing someone whose emotional power and self-possession cannot be diminished, manipulated, or ignored, and that this awareness will alter the way they navigate connection, intimacy, and vulnerability moving forward. Finally, the aftermath of this recognition begins to shape the dynamics of every interaction. They are no longer operating solely from avoidance or fear. There is a subtle recalibration occurring, a shift in perspective that acknowledges your influence and the gravity of your strength. While they may not articulate it, even to themselves, They begin to approach connection with a cautious respect, a quiet admiration, and an awareness that engagement with you demands authenticity, presence, and courage. Every choice, every hesitation, every attempt to retreat or test boundaries is now tempered by the awareness of your unwavering self-possession. And in this aftermath, your influence leaves a lasting imprint, not through coercion or confrontation, but through the quiet, undeniable power of being unshakably yourself, a force they are only beginning to understand, navigate, and respect. The moment of vulnerability begins, subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet it is seismic for someone who has long relied on distance and avoidance as shields. They feel the pull to reveal parts of themselves they have guarded fiercely, the urge to lower the walls they've meticulously built over years. There is a tension in the air, unspoken and electric, as they consider stepping closer, exposing fears, insecurities, and desires that have long remained hidden in shadow. They are drawn toward you not just by attraction, but by the quiet authority of your strength, the calm assurance that you will not exploit their vulnerability, that you will not recoil or overreact. Every instinct they have relied upon to maintain control now faces a paradox. Vulnerability feels dangerous, yet it also feels necessary. They recognize, perhaps for the first time, that someone like you can hold their truth without judgment, that your strength is not a threat, but a sanctuary. And that awareness leaves them both hesitant and desperate to explore what connection might feel like if they allow themselves to step into it. The mirror effect intensifies, reflecting more than just their behaviors. It reflects their potential for growth. They unconsciously begin to emulate your patience, your composure, your groundedness, recognizing that these qualities are not just admirable, but profoundly transformative. Each time they catch themselves responding with thoughtfulness instead of instinctual avoidance. Each time they pause before retreating or overreacting, they realize the quiet but undeniable influence you have on them. It is not coercion or manipulation, it is presence, the raw gravity of someone who embodies what they secretly crave: clarity, authenticity, and unwavering self-respect. And in this reflection, there is a silent internal debate, a wrestling between who they are and who they might become if they step closer, if they dare to engage fully, if they embrace the intimacy they have long avoided. This internal tug-of-war is electrifying, almost painful, yet it is also transformative, and it leaves them awake to the reality that your strength has irrevocably shifted the terrain of connection. Internal conflict peaks as their admiration and fear collide, creating a storm of emotions they cannot neatly categorize. They are drawn to you by the magnetic force of your authenticity, yet repelled by the risk of exposure, the risk of vulnerability, the risk of losing the familiar security of their walls. Each glance, each word, each pause in conversation becomes loaded with unspoken meaning. Every subtle reaction from you, a calm smile, a measured response, a refusal to bend, becomes a mirror for their own fears and desires. They feel the weight of your presence pressing gently but insistently on the parts of themselves they have hidden, exposing truths they've long avoided confronting. And while they may not consciously admit it, this tension is thrilling. It is a reckoning, a confrontation with the self they have kept behind shields. and it is catalyzed entirely by your quiet, unwavering strength. The epiphany arrives almost without warning, like a soft, yet blinding flash. In one quiet moment, a pause in the interaction, a glance, or a subtle gesture, they fully acknowledge the truth. They are facing someone they cannot control, someone whose strength eclipses their avoidance, someone whose authenticity makes their habitual defenses irrelevant. It is a moment that lands with the weight of inevitability, forcing them to confront feelings they have long resisted: admiration, curiosity, attraction, and the faintest hint of respect that they struggle to articulate. This epiphany is profound, not because it is dramatic, but because it is quietly absolute. There is no turning back. The recognition of your power, your consistency, and your unwavering presence has fundamentally altered the internal landscape of their psyche. They are no longer in familiar territory, no longer operating solely from avoidance, and no longer shielded from the emotional truths your strength illuminates. The aftermath of this epiphany reshapes everything, leaving a lasting imprint that they cannot ignore. They begin to approach interactions with a subtle reverence, a cautious engagement that acknowledges your influence without fully articulating it. Every hesitation, every careful word, every retreat is tempered by the awareness that they are dealing with someone who cannot be shaken or bent. They are simultaneously drawn in and wary, fascinated by the calm power you embody, yet aware that connection requires honesty, courage, and vulnerability, the very things they have long feared. And in this aftermath, your influence lingers, a quiet, persistent force that shapes not only the dynamics of connection, but also their own perception of themselves. They leave interactions changed, thinking about the strength, composure, and authenticity they encountered, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, they begin to recognize the possibility of being more present, more honest, and more courageous in the presence of someone who refuses to be shaken. In the end, your strength is not a threat, but a transformation, a gentle, undeniable force that leaves them aware, unsettled, and profoundly influenced, forever recognizing that they met someone too strong to ignore, too authentic to manipulate, and too steady to forget.